The military doesn't tell you during your recruitment phase about the struggles you'll face when your contract is up and it's time to turn in your uniform and return to the civilian side. It's frustrating even for military spouses and families who deal with the constant moving of duty stations and the challenge of finding a job that will hire them because of the timestamp on their employee life cycle being shortened due to association with the military. With an ever more competitive workforce and technology threatening even more of the jobs out there, where can one seek that offers the money and flexibility needed? Join me in conversation as I talk with Greg Drobny about the mission of Code Platoon and how their team is working to solve the veteran employment issue by training professional software engineers through their proven educational process and paid internship programs that they provide. This is Veteran Success Story. Welcome to another episode of Veteran Success Story. In this next episode, I speak with Greg Drobny, who is the outreach coordinator over at Code Platoon. So I know more recently, remote work has become under fire, and there has been kind of a pushback and a recall to the office to a lot of the government employees that are out there. But the mission of Code Platoon really does kind of gives that flexibility for someone as long as they have the discipline to be able to sit down. I know that has a lot to do with it. You got to be a self-starter. You gotta have that discipline involved when you're involved in a remote work capacity. So Code Platoon, their mission is to get people out there, software engineers, training up veterans, military. They have a DoD skill bridge program, as well as military families. That's the big one that I felt sort of set them apart from things, is that I know that when you're in the military, it almost seems like your partner or your significant other is roped into it as well. I mean, you have the fact that so many different PCSs, travel, time away in the field, time away from home on deployments. It's rough on a family. It's rough on that partner. And to be able to have that capability or that capacity to do a remote work, a rewarding career in a job, but also be there for the family, that's big. That's a big capability. And again, for a lot of the people in a military family, that's one of the biggest things that I've seen is the military spouses really get railroaded when it comes to that. That significant other really has a hard time fitting in because you're going to PCS. These employers know that there's a very quick life cycle on who they bring in, so they're not going to bother to train because they're like, hey, you're going to be gone within 2 years, 3 years time. Why am I going to bother with that? So the mission of Code Platoon is to train people up, put them into jobs for software engineering. Phenomenal job what they do. And you know, if you're anybody who's interested in that sort of thing, in remote work, in programming, there's someone that codeplatoon.org, there's someone to look out. I hope you enjoy this episode, and without talking any more about it, let's just get into it. Welcome to another Veteran Success Story. I'm here with Greg Drobny, or oh man, I didn't even ask before. How do you pronounce your last name here?
Long O, Drobny.
Drobny.
Yep.
Greg Drobny of Code Platoon, which, I mean, Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys do over at Code Platoon, just the brief overview before we get into everything. We'll get into more of it later on in the episode, but it's great to have you on the show.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here. I look forward to it. But Code Platoon, elevator speech of Code Platoon is that we're taking people out of the military as they're transitioning out, and we're turning them into software engineers. That's the bottom line of what we do at Code Platoon. Now, it does expand out past that in the sense of you could be a veteran and you could have been out for 10 years and you want to be a software engineer. We're still going to serve you. You could be the spouse of someone in the military and you want to be a software engineer. We're going to serve you as well. And now we have just accepted adult children of military service members can also attend Code Platoon. So it's a software engineering boot camp, condensed down, you want to become a junior software engineer and work in tech. We've condensed that down into a 15-week or 28-week boot camp to launch your career. And that's really the goal at Code Platoon.
Wow, that's awesome. I know through looking through some of it, and I know I I said it before off camera and stuff too, but I love what you guys did with kind of how you have to apply to get into Code Platoon. So you can't just come in like right off the street. I mean, you can, but you have to have some coding experience there. But like you guys have, there's classes up on there on like, hey, this is the introduction to coding. This is what you need to know before applying to be part of the Code Platoon cohort, basically. And then going from there, it's almost like that special operations process for selection. It's you know, that's how I saw it anyway. Was a lot of that correlation there to where we'll teach you the minimal to get into it, and then from there it's you go from there. But what's the process look like in all of that? Like, do you want to just run me through?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to note on that, and maybe I should have mentioned this at the beginning, because this is important to that process, is that Code Platoon is truly a nonprofit organization. And where that comes into play in that process is that everything that you're talking about that leads up to the cohort, we're giving for free. Yeah. All of that is given to you. So if you were to show up at Code Platoon today and say, I know nothing, okay, we're going to give you the materials to get you started. All of that is free. We're just handing it to you. So all of that takes to get in the door, completely free of charge. That's how you start. We're starting, and you mentioned the special operations process. I think maybe the best analogy is something like DLI, like Defense Language Institute, because what we're teaching really is a language, right? We're teaching the languages of JavaScript and Python and in that kind of way. What we want people to do is before they get into the actual cohort is to learn how to say, hello, how are you? My name is, in that foreign language, so that when that cohort starts, we can maximize that time. Right. So you can hit the ground running. The analogy I give to everyone I talk to is the same. I say, imagine how much easier basic training would have been if everybody in your platoon would have been running 2 miles a day and doing 50 push-ups a day. Right. That's not a lot, but it's enough to have that base level so that when you hit day one, you can hit the ground running and you're off to the races. That's more or less what we do. But it's also, and this is one of the things I like about it, I'm not a software engineer, but one of the things I appreciate about this world is that it's one of the rare areas where you can figure out whether or not it's right for you with no investment other than your time. So I contrast this with my wife. My wife's a nurse. My wife had to go through multiple years of schooling before she's ever beside a patient getting kicked, bitten, pooped on, all the nasty stuff that you don't do in school, right? You're like, I had to go through 2 years of school for this? And then you figure out, you're like, maybe this isn't really what I thought it was. Software engineering is exactly what you think it is, because you can start doing it right away. You could come to Code Platoon and start our intro to coding. And if you start doing that program and you're like, this is pretty cool, I've got great news for you, because that's what you're going to be doing as a job, right? So in that way, it's very transparent. We want people to know the basics, to know what they're getting into, and to slowly build up to that point where once you hit a cohort, you're going to be immersed in this. It's going to be all day, every day, which is why I offer the DLI analogy, is because it's more being bombarded with a foreign language and these foreign concepts, and how am I structuring these things to make sense out of them, if that makes sense.
Oh, no, that makes complete sense. Actually, now that you put it that way, that makes much more sense with that immersive, you are that walk, crawl, run,
yes.
Crawl, walk,
run. Yep.
Sometimes, yeah, walking and then you're crawling. But
sometimes we did run first, No,
I totally. No, that's a really good correlation. So how did you end up, and you know what? That's a really good point too. Is the fact with spouses. This can be something that really anybody can do anywhere. Remote work is a really big thing now post-COVID. There's really, the workforce has kind of changed, but coding it allows you to be able to have that job anywhere and have that remote capability, to where you always hear and I've seen it, the struggle of the spouses that are even in towns around military posts. They're hesitant to hire spouses unless it's a temporary type job, just because they know they're going to be moving. So this sort of thing allows flexibility on that side. It might even allow, a veteran who doesn't
get around as easy, or it might be a disabled vet, or, very possible that one in the family is at home, and
Yes.
that right there, it's huge. Remote has opened up a lot of possibilities. And I can see where Code Platoon, for someone who can do it. And again, coding there's a special type of person that's doing it as well. Again, like you said, with language, you got to be able to speak the language and learn it. My cousin does a fair amount of coding, and, a lot of it's just basement hours on the computer. You're a little isolated and whatnot, but if it's something that you love to do, it's a great opportunity.
It is. And that note, I should add, I think it's one of the best skills for a spouse who is in exactly that position. Like you're saying, you're traveling. What is a hard skill that you can do remotely? There aren't very many, right? There are a lot more remote jobs today in our workforce, most assuredly, but oftentimes a hard skill that is remote, those are not the same, right? So a lot of the jobs that are remote, okay, can you write? Yes. Can you speak on the phone well? Sure. But do you have a hard skill that you can make a career out of? Learning JavaScript, Python, software development, all of these things are exactly that. So yeah, for the disabled vet who, has trouble standing, lifting, walking, all those kinds of things, or the spouse, these are ideal for exactly that demographic.
So how did you find yourself, like what you're doing now with Code Platoon and what? Let's back it all up. What's your career look like within the military?
Yeah. So, speaking of remote work and weird connection stories, I'm not a software engineer. Like I said, I have a lot of education in completely different. Like if you designed an education that was as opposite from coding as you could, mine would be pretty close. Master's degrees in history and psychology. That's not coding at all. So I'm pretty far removed from that. But I was a writer for Ranger Up, as we discussed before we started this, for the blog The Rhino Den and a blog called Unapologetically American. I was one of the chief writers for them for several years. And one of the writers who I've spoken with, never met in person. This is where the story gets interesting. Never met this person. He's a National Guard. I think he retired as a first sergeant. He's also a police officer in Florida. He introduced me to another writer for the Duffel blog who happened to be doing the marketing for Code Platoon. I've got two layers of people I've never met in person, still to this day, who introduced me to Code Platoon, a company that is located in Chicago, and I didn't even visit for the first 2 years that I worked for. So there's all these layers of connection, but at any rate, they needed somebody to do kind of exactly what I'm doing right now, which is that veteran voice who talks to people. So I ended up as the recruiter, the person who walks people through the process. Hey, I'm getting ready to get out of the military. I'm thinking about becoming a software engineer. Tell me about what that looks like. So I'm that person that helps bridge that gap. I'm not going to be the instructor. I'm not going to teach you how to write code, way outside my skill set. But I can absolutely talk about this path of, hey, I'm struggling to figure out where my place is after the military. Tell me how to navigate that path. And that's an area I have a lot of experience in. I joined the military late. I was an old man in 2001. The old man part, I was 28 when 9/11 happened. And I joined with the Airborne Ranger contract, what was called the RIP contract at the time.
Yep.
Went through, I was 2.5 days away from graduating RIP, and I broke my hip. And I asked, it was one of those situations where I asked if I could recycle, and they said, Ranger Regiment has no use for a 28-year-old private with a broken hip. It's like, stab in the heart. So I ended up at RTB instead, Ranger Training Brigade, down in Florida, down at Eglin Air Force Base, the 6th Ranger Training Battalion. I was there for almost 3 years. I was an Op-4 guy, got out, came back in to 19th Group, did the whole Special Forces tryout, went through SFAS, tore up my C-spine in that one. So ended up getting out, doing some security contract work, and then coming back in, I did a year as a PSYOP, reclassed to psychological operations, did a year in PSYOP in Iraq. I was in the Tikrit AO for most of that, and then got out, and I was done in 2009. And since then, I've just been kind of trying to find my way in the civilian world, which has resulted in failures and successes, and we can go into detail about that, but it's been an up and down kind of bumpy ride, but somehow have been connected to the veteran community since then. Like I said, I started writing for Ranger Up back in about 2011, right when they were kind of on the rise. And I wrote in to compete for a writing contest, and they never told me I lost. I didn't technically win because they gave a job of the editor-in-chief to this other guy, but they never told me I lost, so I just kept writing articles. I just kept submitting. Ended up being like the chief content writer there for the Rhino Den and Unapologetically American for several years. I don't even know how many hundreds of articles I wrote, a lot. But that ended up connecting me to all of these people in the veteran community via writing. And so that, fast forward to 2020, and I got this connection to say, hey, check out Code Platoon, talk to the executive director, and he impressed me a lot. And in a way that was very different. And this kind of ties into what we talked about before we started the interview here. He impressed me in a way that was different from what I had seen in the veteran community. As you are well aware, there's a lot of people in the veteran community start organizations, maybe nonprofits, and they have the best of intentions, right? Nothing against their intentions. What they don't have is the entrepreneurial experience. Rod Levy, the man who started Code Platoon, was the opposite. He didn't serve. He wasn't in the military. He just had a heart for helping the military. But he had a very successful career in finance, running teams on the Chicago trading floor and, one of those high-flying finance guys, and wanted to do something different to help the veteran community. And so he started this nonprofit with the goal of addressing veteran unemployment, right? And that was his goal, but he had that business sense and that business minded that he did it right, and he built it right from the ground up. And so it wasn't just a good idea that we're kind of, hey, let's try to teach veterans software engineering. It was much more entrepreneurial in its effort, and it shows to this day. Like you said, we check the block of all the things that we've got going for us in terms of what we're capable of doing.
Well, and you're also, the thing that I liked about that too, and in doing my research within about Code Platoon, is that there's so many out there that they're not transparent, or they might have started it and through there you hear a lot about nonprofits and everything, and I'm not dogging on nonprofits and really veteran nonprofits and stuff, but there is post 9/11, what do we have? I think the numbers are in like 40,000 different nonprofits that are involved with veteran issues. For one, that is like so much to swim through. Yeah. I had never even heard of Code Platoon to start with, and it was through talking with, it was actually Jack Murphy about that. And he sent me your info, and he's like, yeah, you should talk to these guys. They're a really good opportunity for other veterans out there. And when I started digging in and seeing that, the amount of transparency and that you guys were doing things right through Candid and like, hey, this is how we use our funding. This is how, like, there's a plan here, and this is who we're servicing, and these are the hoops you have to jump through to be part of it so that you have some skin in the game, and that we're not wasting our time here because, time and money, especially for a nonprofit, I see these, there's certain ones that, I guess one of the ones that you kind of go into and stuff or talk about instances is, some of the ones that do these either retreats or reunions and stuff. Mm-hmm. They're great. They really are. I've been through a few of them and stuff, and I've kept in touch with, it's put me in touch with some of the guys or kept me in touch with some of the guys that I had deployed with. But at the same time, that's up to the guys. There's nothing that's holding people to stuff. There's no accountability and stuff. In the program that you have, there's a lot of accountability built in. You're building these cohorts when there's this mission in order to get people there, and it shows through your graduation rates and through your job placements. And it's an overall great program that you guys have put together, and that Rob is doing, and that what was your impression? What drew you to them through Rob, other than the fact that, like, what was the thing that kind of pushed you over the edge, like, what, I should be working with these guys, or this is something where we could do together?
I think, well, it's a great question. I think there are a few things. Number one, it's exactly what you just said, is that this was something that was tied to a hard skill, which is inherently accountable. right? It's not esoteric, right? You either, when you're building websites and building, you're doing web design and building database structures and things like that, it works or it doesn't, right? It's not an esoteric concept that's, how do you feel about your life right now? Those are great. Like you said, they have their place. But when you talk about things like veteran employment, well, you need hard skills, right? And it's like, imagine a welding school. Well, you either teach people to weld in ways that brings metal together or it doesn't. And so it's a hard skill in that sense. So that was what I think first drew me to it. Second was the honesty. It doesn't apologize for being hard or not for everyone. So I use myself as an example. At no point in my 5 years at Code Platoon have I ever been compelled to talk people into Code Platoon who shouldn't be there. Yeah. So there's never been a time where you said, oh, you need to really push this person, who probably shouldn't be here. And we've always been very honest. We say, listen, this is a hard skill. It's a hard skill to learn, and you're going to have to put your nose down and really dig in to do so. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay, right? There is no need to pressure and say, no, we got to do the hard sell. We got to do the hard sell and talk people into something that maybe they shouldn't be doing in the first place. So that really impressed me. And then the Rod Alevi, again, he has a very interesting take on how to run an organization, which is mostly as a flat organization. One of the things I respect about him immensely, and something that has benefited Code Platoon, is that anyone can have an idea and will try it. And there are a lot of leaders who claim that, but it's not real. And you know that. We all know that. We've been around those leaders who say, well, if you've got a good idea, pitch it to me. Yeah, okay. But Code Platoon is a place where quite literally any idea somebody has, the first words out of his mouth are going to be, if it's remotely possible, we're going to say, well, let's try it. Let's do it. Let's do this method that you're speaking of. So I've really appreciated those factors as a very honest, forthright organization that is, and I should add this too. There are a lot of veteran organizations out there who very much value the elaborate veteran resume. So for example, you did this, you had this tab and you had this, qualification. That's who we have to staff our organization with. Half of the people at Code Platoon didn't serve in the military. They were affiliated with it. So they had parents who served, they had siblings or spouses, whatever. But in other words, whoever is the right person for the job, that's who we need. Because ultimately, just because you have a special forces tab does not mean that you're going to be a good marketing person, right? Like, maybe it's a cool thing, but it doesn't necessarily make it that way. So if the end goal is to provide a training environment for veterans, then that's the end goal. And whatever helps that end goal is what we should be focused on. And in other words, you don't have to be a former X, whatever X is, Marine, pilot, whatever. You don't have to be that in order to help veterans do that. And in fact, in some cases, it hinders you.
Exactly. I mean, that's actually that's a really good point too. That when I was going to school, when I was going to college, that was one of the things. There's a military and veterans center down like in one of the basement portions and stuff. And I would go there a few times and stuff here and there throughout the school year, but there was guys that they would isolate themselves, from the civilian side, from community and everything down there. And it's like, okay, that's one thing, and I know exactly what you did in the military because you told me almost every other time down here, well, let's get off the old bar stool and let's start doing things around campus. So, I mean, I know that sometimes we have a tendency as veterans to do that. So, I mean, that's good to have someone on that civilian side there, part of the instructing course, part of everything, because we need to be able to interact. It can't always be that end of things. You need to get over it and transition over to that side of things.
Absolutely. And especially when the end goal is to launch your career in a civilian sector, right? Exactly. And I think that's missing a lot. I've been to, and I'm sure you've been to, VA sponsored career services where somebody leading the day for how to write your resume, the person doing it is a 25-year-old Air Force vet who just got out 6 weeks ago. And you're like, what? Like, why are you telling me how to write a resume that I want to go work for Hewlett Packard, or I want to go work for Microsoft, and you're telling me how to write a resume? Like, something doesn't.
That's all I could. Yeah, that's all I could think
add
of
up
when I went through the Army TAP program. Was I'm like, why is this person teaching this class? This is the blind leading the blind.
Right.
You know?
Yeah,
Oh.
and so I think that it benefits greatly to have that. Our lead instructor was a software engineer. That's what he's done, and that's probably how it should be. The second instructor was a Marine Corps instructor and then became a software engineer. So it offers that balance, right? We have that balance, but I don't think, and that's, again, coming back to what I think sets Code Platoon apart in some ways, is that we're not reliant on an entirely military mindset, because our goal is to launch your career in not the military. If our goal is to help you have a career maybe in defense contracting, maybe that would be the case. But even then, you want people with that civilian experience. It's necessary. And I think that we've embraced that. And we're not apologizing for the fact that several people in leadership are not military veterans. And that's okay. That's a good thing.
And there's so many people out there that either they also have that call to serve other people, or that that purpose built into them, and what better of a way than to help people in that capacity, help people who have served but now they're searching, they're on their own path. And speaking of that path, so what does it look like for someone who wants to look into Code Platoon, wants to start being involved, or they either know nothing about coding or they're just very minimal and they come across your guys' service? What does this look like for someone who's interested?
Yeah. And that's where I come in. This is exactly what I do. And the easiest way to start that path is to email me, Greg@codeplatoon.org. It's super simple. You can just email me and say, hey, I'm interested. That's the first place you can start. Another place you can start, though, is to go to our website, codeplatoon.org, and click on that Apply Now button. And what that does is, once you fill that out, which is really easy, it starts that process. And what it's going to trigger is basically us sending you all the steps that, what comes next, of how we answer that very question is, okay, I want to become a software engineer, or I think I want to become a software engineer. How do I answer that question? What are my next steps? Step one, talking to me and having me explain to you what it looks like. And it may be different than what you think it is. And in which case you can make a decision based on that. Or it may be exactly what you think it is, in which case, awesome, let's keep going. And then it involves me giving you the resources necessary to start going down that same path. Now, here's where this gets really cool. We've actually started to institute numerous ways of doing this. The first way is to do this completely on your own. So I mentioned that free material that we offer at the beginning. Yep. We can give you an introductory course to Python, say, for example, the coding language of Python. And in case people don't know what Python is, the entire YouTube is based on the language of Python. So it's a very heavily used language. And yes, it is named after Monty Python, because the guy who created it named it after Monty Python. I just learned this not that long ago. I was like,
awesome.
Really? No kidding. So at any rate, you can do this all on your own. We can give you the courses necessary. We have hundreds upon hundreds of hours of content available free on our YouTube channel. So that's a good place to start, is just to go through this on your own. But we've also started with something called a guided application class. And what that is that it's a little over 3-week long class in the evenings, again, free of charge, for you to have an instructor lead you through this application process and teaching you what you need to know. These are also all available on YouTube that you can go and check out right now. If you typed in Code Platoon guided application, you'll see these free classes that we offer. So in other words, we have multiple avenues of approach, to use that old military term, of saying, hey, you can come in this way, come in this way. We're all going to get you to the same place. And it's kind of tailored to what works best for you. We have a lot of people who do great on their own. right? They come to us and say, hey, I want to dive into this. Just give me what I need, and I'm going to rock it through it. Awesome. Go for it. And then we have people who say, hey, I really prefer a class-structured environment where an instructor is teaching me. We've got that too. So we have these multiple options for people to take advantage of. All of that I just mentioned costs nothing beyond your time. $0. And I think that's what sets Code Platoon apart from other, even top-tier coding schools. For the record, what we've mentioned here of learning something before you get into the school, some people kind of blanch at that. They're like, why should I have to learn something before I learn something, right? It does seem kind of contradictory. It's like, you're teaching me, so yes and no. We want to maximize that boot camp time, right? We want to maximize that. So you do need to show that this is really what you want to do. But two, this is also the way that all top-tier coding schools work. We're not unique in that regard. So if you Google the top coding schools out there, you're going to find very similar structured things. The difference is that Code Platoon is that we offer just tremendous amounts of material free of charge, completely free. We're giving away the store for you to get going on this to figure out whether or not it's right for you. That enables us to hit that day one and say, no, you really want to be here. And that means all of your cohort mates, the people who are also in there with you, they want to be there. You mentioned special operations analogy. That's what makes special operations different in a lot of ways, right? It's not just funding. It's not that they get all the cool toys. It's that they have higher standard and everyone there wants to be there. Usually. There's always some bad apples.
Who slips by.
There's always somebody. But you know what I mean? It's the threshold is raised, and it makes it so that everybody who's on your team really wants to be there.
Yeah, no. That's again, skin in the game. You know, if you can't hack it, or I mean, really, you can do anything you put your mind to. I've seen some people do absolutely incredible things to where they were told the whole way along, you're not going to make it. That's not going to happen. It won't happen this way. You know, and it's really up to you. It's what do you want to give up or sacrifice to make it happen? But really, I had been looking at a whole bunch of the YouTubes and stuff before we even got on. I was looking the other night and stuff through the research, and I'm like, oh my God, these guys put a ton of stuff online. There really is. I mean, you just punch in Code Platoon on YouTube and a ton of stuff shows up. So I mean, it's pretty easy to find you once you know what you're looking for, the name of Code Platoon. Right. It really is. So like what's zero cost to somebody? What does that mean? Like, how do you guys fund? Do you go through VR&E, GI Bill? Like, is there scholarships and stuff? Exactly how does one get this paid for or funded?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's a great lead-in and allows me to clarify. What I was meaning by zero cost was all of the preliminary, right? Everything leading up to the actual cohort. The cohort itself does have a tuition. So the tuition currently sits at $20,000. However, before anybody turns off and says, oh my gosh, I don't think anybody's ever paid that in the history of Code Platoon. We are a true nonprofit, and it has been the mission of the director since Code Platoon's inception is that tuition would not be a barrier to attendance. And we mean that when we say it. So we've got all the options. So you mentioned VA options. Yes, the options are yes, we do have those. So VR&E is a great tool for those who don't know about VR&E. Fantastic tool that not a lot of people are aware of. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what VR&E is. You've probably talked about it on your show, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail unless you want me to. But VR&E is an option.
A little bit. I actually haven't gone into VR&E, but I mean, you could give a little bit of a base on it. I do plan on having some people on because that is such a big thing. Within getting these things funded, and I've used it before myself, and it's phenomenal. To be able to have that resource there.
And it is a great resource. And I think the biggest mistake that veterans make. So first of all, VR&E, Veterans Readiness and Employment, right? That's what VR&E stands for. I question that all the time because for those unaware, it used to be called Voc Rehab. Vocational Rehab is what it was called, to the level that if you look at the URL on the VA's website page for VR&E, it still says Voc Rehab. They didn't even change the URL. So it's,
Shocker.
I know it as Voc Rehab and I always get confused. So what it is, it's basically an initiative that helps disabled veterans retrain and reintegrate into the workforce based on their disability. That's the biggest lesson to learn about VR&E before you go into it. For anybody wanting to look into it, a lot of people walk into VR&E thinking of it like the GI Bill. And they go into a VR&E counselor and they say, hey, I want to get a degree paid for. And the VR&E counselor goes, get out. You're done. Because that's not what VR&E is for. Yeah. VR&E is specifically related to a disability rating. Now, it's not a high threshold. I think it's 20%. I think you have to have a 20% rating. So it's not like you have to be 100% disabled by any means. I want to say it's a 20. I could be wrong on that.
I'm not really sure on that one, but I know what you mean. It is a much lower.
It's much lower than you would think.
Yeah.
So it is connected to that in the sense of your disability has to be such that you can say, so I use myself as an example. I was trained first as an airborne infantryman. I broke my hip. What does airborne infantryman train you to be? Not much, right? There's not many jobs in the civilian world where you could say, well, that works. But maybe
jump out of planes and shoot people in the face.
Right.
Yeah.
When that's part of your job description, it's like, So, I mean, the closest thing you could say is maybe police officer, right? Well, I can't spend a lot of time in a car. So it just hurts like hell to spend a lot of time in a car. So being a cop is out. So I go to the VR&E counselor and I say, hey, so this is what I was trained to be, but I have this injury that prevents me from doing X. I want to retrain to be Y.
Yeah.
That's what VR&E is for. They will then work with you to develop a path and say, okay, how do we get to Y? Software engineer. I want to be a software engineer. Okay, how can we do that? Well, there is this coding boot camp that's devoted to veterans. Cool. And we go from there and we help you connect those dots once you've met with that counselor and use VR&E. And it's great because they'll pay your whole tuition. They'll give you a living stipend. And in most cases, they'll pay for a laptop. So you need a laptop to go through Code Platoon. That's an expense. And so they'll pay for that. So VR&E is great, but do your homework. As you know, you've gone through the process. Do your homework before going into it. Don't go into it acting like it's an entitlement, like the GI Bill. Like, hey, I need a doctorate funded. It's possible, maybe.
It is possible. Actually, crazy enough, I've seen people, like, if you can justify it, but it has to be solid. You know, they want a solid plan.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Just as an aside, you were absolutely right about 20%. I looked it up really quick. So, I mean, 20% is correct, which is, I mean, somebody with asthma, I think, has above 20%.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a very low threshold. Like, I don't know anybody who doesn't have 20%. I think everybody I know has at least that.
The guy who didn't file.
That's the answer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So VR&E is a great option. It's one that I recommend all the time because it's a fantastic way to go through Code Platoon. But beyond that, we've got a few options that are, and when I say they are new, I mean as of 2025. We have changes that have happened at the VA for those unaware that are impacting Code Platoon right now. So for 5 years, there was something called Vet Tech. And I don't know if you were aware of Vet Tech, but Vet Tech was a funding initiative through the VA that was specifically designed for programs like ours. Now, it wasn't specific to Code Platoon, but it was for tech training. Because for a long time, the VA, with the GI Bill, there were a lot of difficulties in funding schools that were not accredited. So when you take something like Microsoft Training Academy, well, that's pretty reputable, but it's not accredited, regionally accredited like a college is. And so the VA says, nope, not going to fund it. Which is kind of a travesty, right? Well, Vet Tech was initiated to address exactly that. Vet Tech was also a pilot program, and it ran out last year. It sunsetted, it was dead, gone. They just resurrected it under what is called the Elizabeth Dole, I think it's the healthcare. If you look up the Elizabeth Dole Act, most of the Elizabeth Dole Act has to do with healthcare. Within the Elizabeth Dole Act is a resurrection of a similar initiative to Vet Tech. They're not calling it Vet Tech anymore, but it's similar with some changes. So we're still, the bottom line with this one is we're still waiting to see how that gets implemented because it was just signed by the president 2 weeks ago, a week ago. And as you know, things at the VA don't happen that fast, right? So we got to wait like a couple months to see how this is implemented. But by the time you go through the application process to Code Platoon, fingers crossed, we have some more options on the table for funding. So we've got that on the table. Now we've got the recent Supreme Court decision with the GI Bill, right? So that added 12 months potentially to certain veterans who served at certain times, yours truly being one of them. I got an email from the VA, you might get an extra 12 months of GI Bill. Cool. I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
Yeah.
Here's to hoping it's retroactive. I can pay off some school loans. I don't know how this has worked, but at any rate, so there's this other option that has come down the pike. And then beyond that, we also have the GI Bill. GI Bill works a little bit differently for schools like ours. It will work pretty straight away if you come in person. And then if you're remote, they just authorize a different type of using the GI Bill for a school like ours. I encourage people to talk to me, one-on-one for that, because it gets pretty deep in the weeds and I don't want to, tie up a super in-depth conversation with that. But then beyond that, and then here's where Code Platoon really sets itself apart, is that we have tremendous funding resources for scholarships. So we have scholarships that fit every demographic who attends Code Platoon. And these scholarships typically range between 80 and 100% of the tuition covered, depending on what you qualify for. So again, first you mentioned SkillBridge earlier. Somebody comes through as a SkillBridge student. We have a scholarship for that person, right? If they qualify for it, and they're probably going to qualify for it, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that tuition is not a factor. And I'll close that part of the conversation with this. I've been at Code Platoon 5 years. I've seen a lot of people not come to Code Platoon for various reasons, right? Whether it was too hard, whether it was just that they didn't want to be a software engineer, various reasons. I've never seen tuition be that reason. Not once. I've never seen someone say, I'm not coming because it's too expensive. It's never happened in 5 years that I've been here and hundreds of students.
No, and that's awesome. I mean, that never should be a barrier to someone, who is a veteran, who's trying to better themselves or trying to get themselves back out into the workforce. I can completely understand it either being too hard, they didn't make the requirements for the coding end of things, and that's all well and good. That's really like a self-select, but to be hindered by funding, hey, I can't figure this out. And it sounds a lot too like, Greg, you would point them in the right direction or guide them through as well. I mean, it sounds like you have good people over there to do that sort of thing with the people coming in, and that's, that leads to a whole nother thing too, is that, if you're getting somebody who's transitioning from the military side into the civilian side, wants to go through this program, those times that's really the crucial time. That's where a lot of those numbers, like you see, like the 22 vets a day, issues with suicide, issues with, barriers to help out there with guys. A lot of that happens within that transitionary period. So this is great that you guys are doing that and adding to that tool bag, and that kit that somebody has available to them. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit on a key point there, which is, when we talk about those types of issues, number one, recognizing that there is no cure-all for something like as complex as veteran suicide, right? We shouldn't ever say that there is. But if we can distill things down to some of the basic causes, we can see that one of them kind of percolates to the surface a lot, which is purpose, right? And this concept of purpose, of having purpose while you were in the military and now getting out and saying, it's really kind of vague what your purpose is. One of the ways to address that framework is to have a hard skill.
Yep.
Right. It really is. And it's because it's as old as mankind, right? If you have a hard skill that is valued, you have that sense of purpose in a way that you wouldn't if you don't. So it's not to say that this is the cure-all, and I'm not ever going to propose any such thing, but to go through something that is both challenging and imparting a hard skill is a huge step in addressing those problems.
Yep. Are you guys doing anything in the way of, I know just with it being such a big thing right now, and I'm sure you are, but AI, what do you guys offer in the way of either AI coding or introduction into or familiarization courses, anything on that end of things?
Yes. Bottom line, yes. Short answer.
Have to these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And longer answer is I'm going to be upfront with the fact that I'd be way out of my depth unless I caveat this heavily with saying I'm not an expert in AI. So by no means do I want to portray me offering some very knowledgeable, in-depth answers to what we're doing in that regard. But we did immediately start incorporating the use of large language models in our curriculum, how it's working in software engineering today. We're using them in our projects. So one of the cool things, if people want to find out what you do at Code Platoon, like what your actual end goal is, one of the cool things we do is our graduation videos. So if you were to go to Code Platoon YouTube right now and type in Code Platoon graduation, our graduation videos are not us high-fiving each other and giving certificates. They are the students debuting their final projects. And they're talking through what they made. And you'll see apps and websites. And you will actually get to hear them explain, here's how we incorporated these AI tools. Here's how we incorporated this large language model technology in a practical way that people would use in an actual working environment, rather than just some high-level conceptual, well, where is AI going and is it going to kill us all? Maybe, but who cares? Because right now the goal is, how do we make money with this? And so we're looking at it much more from a practical level of, if you're building a website and if you're training people to build apps and websites and things like that, how are we incorporating these tools? How are they helping with software engineering? How are they making the job easier? And what do you need to know in order to go further into that? So, yes, absolutely, we're incorporating it because you have to, but it's not the cure-all that I think a lot of people thought that it would be. The analogy I use, and again, I'm a layman, so I'm using, of course, a layman's analogy, is I was an infantryman, and I can tell you that my first year in the infantry, I spent more time with a mop and a broom than I did with a rifle in my hand, right? And probably every infantryman out there is like, yeah, totally did, right? Now imagine doing the job of an infantryman, but you have the mop and the broom taken away by a robot. That's a lot of what AI is doing now. The job of a software engineer didn't go away, but a lot of the trash components, a lot of the lower level stuff that can be solved easier is now made infinitely simpler and taken off your plate, so you can do more. And it's like the old joke about, military gear. As an infantryman, they make the gear lighter so you can carry more, right? It's like,
that's the truth.
Look back at what guys carried in World War II. It's the same amount of weight. It's just way less stuff. You're like, you still have like 70 pounds of gear. It's just that you had like 30 rounds and I had 300,
No, you're not wrong at all there. Not wrong at all. What do you guys, do you have any success stories that jump out at you in particular for one of your students that has been through the program? Is there any of them that you followed and really saw it and it kind of impressed you there? And we're like, man, look at that. Like,
a lot. We have I don't know where to begin.
That's hard.
Well, to pick one or two is hard because I can tell you of three names pop to mind immediately because they now work for Code Platoon. So one is one of our main instructors. He was Francisco was a Marine Corps infantryman turned Marine Corps instructor, and he came out and wanted to have a more stable life for his daughter. He didn't want to travel around the world and be gone from his daughter's life all the time. And so he comes to Code Platoon. I help him get into Code Platoon, and he ends up becoming an instructor, right? That to me is just, it's awesome because he did exactly what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And he's successful at it. He's very good, and he's a great instructor. Then we've got the pre-work instructor, the gentleman who grades all of our applications, another former infantryman. He is an Army man, and he came through Code Platoon. I helped him get to Code Platoon. He got out, got a job with AWS, Amazon Web Services, and now does Code Platoon help as an additional job. So, he followed the path again. And then our program director is also, he was a retired Air Force F-16 mechanic, right? So here's somebody who, is ready to retire, transition in that next phase of life, and it ends up at Code Platoon managing the program itself. So we've got those 3 just at Code Platoon that come immediately to mind because I talk to them all the time. But then we've got students out there who, I know of one gentleman in particular who, he was a special forces guy, door kicker, had 0 experience in tech. And I mean, none. Like he had sent a couple of emails, I think, at the time that he came to Code Platoon. And he came to Code Platoon and is now making over 6 figures as a software engineer. And that's his experience in tech. Like he didn't go to college first and then come to Code Platoon. He started with 0 experience, and he's now making over 6 figures and doing very, very well for himself. There are numerous examples of that, of varying degrees. That's why I started the Veteran Voices in Code Service to Software series that you may have seen on our YouTube channel, where I interview people to find out how they came from very different backgrounds. Right? We had a group of linguists. We've had a lot of linguists come through. We've also had, oddly enough, a lot of military band members, musicians. Musicians and coding is a connection that I would not have anticipated before working here, but there is. And it makes sense as soon as you see it. When you learn to read music, what are you learning? You're learning a code.
Code, yeah.
Right? And if you can do that, you can translate that into playing music. Software engineering is not that much of a leap. Obviously, it's a new type of code. You're learning a new skill, but there are some connections there. And we've had a number of people who, they spent 10 years in the military, in the Army band, the Air Force band, the Navy band, and now they're software engineers. Because really, when you think about it, if you're going to get out of the military as a professional musician, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You're not going to go play for the symphony, right? Because
Yep.
those people have been doing that for decades.
Yeah.
So, that's one of those sharp drop-offs where there's, you talk about infantry being a sharp drop-off. Musician, well, you're not going to just join the Denver Symphony or the Chicago Symphony because there's about 1,000 people in line to do that job. Yep. So what are you going to do? Well, and that's where I see the success stories for me personally, is these areas where there is not at all a one-to-one correlation for what you did in the military to what you can do outside of it. And so coming to a place like Code Platoon and restarting your career, to me, that is huge. And that's what I take a lot of admiration for. I almost said pride, but it's not my pride. Like, I'm not proud I didn't do it. They did it. But a lot of admiration for folks who, again, they're faced with this end of what they were doing. I mean, you're a special forces guy. There's nothing in the civilian world that compares to that. Nothing.
Yeah.
Right. There's not a single job out there where you're like, yeah, this is the same. No. So you got to do something that captivates you, that intrigues you. And having that thing that you can latch onto and learn, I think, is a huge, huge component of making that transition. Because like you said, at some point you have to get off the bar stool and stop telling stories.
Yeah.
You just do. We have to move forward. Yes, it was a great experience. Yes, you learned a lot in the military. Time to move forward. Engage with the next objective.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. That's I don't know how many times I see that, that person's stuck in the past and stuff. And these stories are good. It's like an origin story or a foundation, and it's good to go back to. And it's good to some of the war stories and stuff that we have. I know in my experience, I put a lot of this stuff down in a book. But that is that preservation of those memories of those people, and really a reiteration of like why I do what I do anyway, is like that purpose there. What are you doing, or why are you doing this? Well, that's all ingrained in part of it, but that's not me. That's not what actually drives me. That's a piece of the story, but what are you doing now? What's next up? What's the future look like for you? And it sounds like everything at Code Platoon that you guys have going on, it's a great mission. And it sounds like the culture behind it, if you're having people that, went through the program, went forward and actually, obtain that next step, like the particular one that you're talking about in the Amazon services, but is taking the time to give back into Code Platoon after all that. It's just not like a, thank you there for what you've done for me. All right, I'm going forth and conquering, but actually even coming back to be part of the process of other people coming through Code Platoon. that says a lot right there. And that's really cool to hear that.
It is. And I should add too, that's something that Code Platoon it just grew organically at Code Platoon. The alumni who come back to help, it has been, you asked about what drew me to Code Platoon, or what I find to be some of its best attributes. That's one of them, because that's not something that was ever compelled. We never told the alumni, the graduates, to say, hey, you have to come back and help. But there are a lot who do. And it's exactly what you just said. That speaks well of an organization when people who come through it want to go back and mentor those people that are upcoming and help them. And that's been really cool to see.
So Greg, really quick, I know you said it before, but people have this tendency to remember the last thing on there. So
yeah.
Somebody who is looking for Code Platoon or looking to be part of this, besides typing in Code Platoon to Google or YouTube, what's the main avenues here?
Like I said, emailing me, greg@codeplatoon.org, is probably the simplest, especially if you prefer one-on-one communication. Me, and I try to do exactly that. That's what I've kind of become known for at Code Platoon, is wherever you are, I want to meet you there, right? And I don't mean physically, I just mean whatever your background is. I'm not going to fly to your hometown.
Greg's just going to pop up like a CIA.
Show up like, hey, what's up? I tracked you via Facebook. No. But I'm going to meet you where you are in terms of your experience, what you are hoping to do, what your thoughts are. And I'm not a hard salesman. I'm not somebody who wants to talk you into Code Platoon. I want to help you on your path. That's my main goal, right? My goal is to say, you've got a path. Whatever that path is, I'm going to help you do it the best I can. And if that involves Code Platoon, awesome. If it doesn't, that's okay too. I did once talk someone out of Code Platoon. This person had a doctorate, and they were wanting to come to Code Platoon just so they could learn to speak to software engineers better. And I was like, that may be overkill.
Yeah,
I appreciate your initiative, but so I'm not going to be the one who's hard selling you. But beyond that, if you don't want to talk to me right away, that's okay too. The best thing to do is, as we mentioned earlier, going to our YouTube page is probably one of the best places to start. We do webinars where we just do a Q&A session where we're presenting things. So you can look that up on our YouTube page. You can watch the Veteran Voices in Code series that I was talking about, Service to Software, where I interview people of different backgrounds, trying to get more people to interview, by the way. So hopefully we'll add to that list. And then our website's pretty informative as well. But, go based on what works for you. If you want to talk to a human being, I'm the person to do so with. And I set up phone calls all the time with people one-on-one so that I can talk to them about what their options are.
Oh, there you go. That and so codeplatoon.org, right?
Correct. That is correct.
Awesome. Greg, hang out for a second, because I know I talked to you about this before.
Yeah.
But just wanted to say thanks again for coming on the show and talking about Code Platoon and some of the opportunities that guys have either outside of service or transitioning, during that period and stuff. And, I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Will. I appreciate the time. And I look forward to seeing you being successful in this too, because I love what you're doing.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of Veteran Success Story. If you like the content that you've found in the episode that you listened to, you found it helpful, or anybody out there that it could also be helpful for, share. Let them know about it. That's actually one of the biggest things that I see in the metrics end of things, the ends that people can't see, is that 97% of the people who listen to the show, they're not subscribed, they don't follow, but they keep coming back. So interesting. It does help us out on this end if people follow, subscribe. I don't want to inundate your feed with stuff, but I try to keep this free of charge, just due to the fact that a lot of people that are out there looking for this information, it wouldn't do good by them to be charging for it, to be charging these subscription fees or Patreon and stuff. So I want to put that up for free. to you guys, but I need your guys' help. I need for people to follow and subscribe on these channels for it to be able to grow and for me to be able to attract some of the sponsors out there. Not to inundate the show with that stuff, but I'll do it in a way to where this stuff is not going to be some fly-by-night company. It's stuff that I use, stuff that I've found to work to actually lead towards being successful. But that being said, Code Platoon, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. CodePlatoon.org. They also have a phenomenal YouTube channel just at Code Platoon. I'll put links in the description of everything, as well as I'm working on a website to put together to have kind of the highlights and what you're looking at with certain things to be able to sort of link tree it even further. But until then, go straight to the source. Look at CodePlatoon.org. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Reach out to Greg. I believe his email, he had said it in there, was greg@codeplatoon.org. Talk to him about what the next steps are if you're interested in programming and in that work, whether it be in office or remote capacity. It's one of those skills that it's going to be used more and more frequently. It's one of those things that can put something in your wheelhouse to give you a capacity to be able to do that work anywhere, work from anywhere in the world, quite honestly. You're going to need more and more of them as time goes on. So I hope you join me for next week, for our next guest coming up. Have another great episode coming your way. And again, continue. I want to be pushing these things out every week. So stay tuned, follow, subscribe for more content. I hope you found it valuable. And again, this has been yet another veteran success story.
We have cutting-edge curriculum, great instructors. It's a long, immersive program, and we really make sure that folks that attend our program are prepared to succeed.
The way we teach and the experience you have in the program prepares you for success in the tech industry.
Code Platoon is a boot camp. You hit the ground running, it's go, go, go. So being surrounded by people that you already have that similar experience with, and also form cohesive teams within the classroom, definitely gives you a leg up.
Code Platoon is a non-profit coding boot camp for the veteran community. Coding boot camps, when done well, can be a really powerful way to go from zero to junior software developer in a very compressed time frame.
They take you from no experience to getting paid to do this for a living. It's amazing what you do in just like 3-4 months.
One of the main reasons why I was interested in Code Platoon is because of their apprenticeship program. They help you get a job after you graduate. And in my case, I actually got a job before I graduated.
Within a few months, I had multiple job offers, and I think that speaks to how well this program prepares you.
They have discipline coming in the door, incredibly dedicated, incredibly hardworking, incredibly productive. I have seen a high rate of learning and progress from each of the graduates I've hired.
The ability to use like vet tech or to use the GI Bill to attend Code Platoon where there's nothing coming out of your pocket for the curriculum, and in a lot of cases you're actually paid a basic monthly allowance.
Since I did SkillBridge, I reached out to the staff at Code Platoon. They helped me apply for a scholarship. As soon as I got out of SkillBridge, Code Platoon, I rolled right into here at DRW.
Code Platoon is a very inclusive environment. Everybody wants the person sitting next to them to succeed, no matter their background, no matter where they're from.
We have a really comprehensive guest speaker program with folks who are currently in the industry coming in, both to give technical talks, talks on diversity and inclusion, talks on product teams. We also have our own curriculum that we run that covers working on how to handle behavioral questions, how to talk about your military experience.
Everybody's very knowledgeable, everyone's very supportive of you. The curriculum is very feature rich. You learn a lot of skills too that are just good life skills. It taught me a lot about how to learn quickly. Overall, you just can't really go wrong with Code Platoon.
Code Platoon provided me with the opportunity that I didn't think was really possible for me to be able to start a new career after finishing college and after going through the military, and I'm just really thankful.
It was probably the best choice I've ever made in my life, honestly. And you get paid to go learn a very valuable skill, and then they hook you up with a job after that. It's great. I was in the Army National Guard.
I was in the United States Air Force.
I'm a United States Marine.
And I'm a Code Platoon alumni.
I'm a Code Platoon alumni.
I'm a Code Platoon alumni.